Hey everyone, it's Julie from Sprouts and Stems. Today's video is all about how to care for the Peperomia Obtusifolia, also known as the baby rubber plant. So let's get started. The Peperomia Obtusifolia is actually a very easy to care for plant. They do grow pretty slowly, so that might make you think that you're doing something wrong, but really that's just how this plant grows. This plant prefers bright and direct light. It is tolerant of low light, but as with any plant, it won't really thrive to its full potential in low light. As you can see, my peperomias are variegated, so they're actually Peperomia Obtusifolia variegata. Plants with variegation need more light to maintain that variegation because the lighter green parts have less chlorophyll. Actually, if you go to my blog post on this plant, link in the description, you'll see what my plant looked like when it nearly lost all of its variegation because I had it in a low light position. Your plant isn't dying if this happens, but it's just something to be mindful of. I was actually able to grow new variegated leaves with some strategic pruning. I won't get into that today, but if you'd like to hear more about that, let me know. Peperomia Obtusifolia likes to almost completely dry out between waterings. Peperomias have succulent-like leaves and stems that store water. So a really easy way to tell if your plant needs to be watered is to gently feel the leaves. If you can easily bend them and they're super flexible, then it's definitely time to water your plant. Once you do, the leaves and stems will fill back up with water and become rigid again. The Obtusifolia is native to humid environments, so they will appreciate higher humidity. Now, this isn't something that will really make or break whether they grow or not, but it's just something to keep in mind if you live in a dry area. I keep mine in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet, which satisfies its light and humidity requirements. When it comes to potting mix, a lot of peperomias, including this one, are epiphytes, meaning they grow on the surface of another plant, like a crevice of a tree trunk, for example. Or a lot of them are also lithophytes too, which is the same concept but with rocks. You won't see them growing out of the ground. Now, since their roots aren't tightly packed into the ground, but rather growing in loose organic matter, and since they like to dry out in between waterings, this means we need to use a loose, well-draining potting mix that allows for nice aeration to the roots. This might sound kind of complicated, but I promise it's not. A mixture of regular houseplant potting mix, perlite, and orchid bark will work really well. I usually just eyeball potting mix recipes, but about a 2:1:1 ratio of those ingredients or a balanced ratio of the three will work really well. And by the way, you can find links to these ingredients and all other supplies I use for this plant in the blog post in the video description. And as another tip, don't pack things down as you're potting up your peperomia because remember, it doesn't like to be tightly packed in soil. Repot your Peperomia Obtusifolia every few years. They grow slowly, have smaller root systems, and are okay with getting a little root bound, so really there's no rush to repot them. You can repot them every couple of years, and that might just involve giving it some fresh potting mix but keeping the same pot size if it still fits in its current home. If it does look like it's outgrown its pot and needs a bigger home, use a pot the next size up and make sure it has a drainage hole. This peperomia doesn't really need to be fertilized, and I actually only fertilize mine every once in a while. You definitely can fertilize this plant, but just keep in mind its small root system could make it more prone to over-fertilization. so less is definitely more with fertilizer. Use a balanced houseplant fertilizer diluted to half its strength once a month during the spring and summer. So that almost wraps up this Peperomia Obtusifolia care guide. I do have one last tip, but it kind of applies to all plants. I'm just bringing it up here because for whatever reason, I've noticed it a lot more on my Peperomia Obtusifolia than I have on my other plants. Over time, your plant's leaves might collect dust, or you might notice mineral deposit marks on the leaves depending on the kind of water you have. So if you see this, you can just take a damp cloth every now and then and just gently wipe the leaves clean. Keeping the leaves clean of debris will just help keep your plant happy and photosynthesizing to the best of its ability. So this really is not like a huge deal and not something you have to be constantly on the lookout for, but like I said, I've just noticed this more on this plant than other plants, so I just wanted to mention that. That brings us to the end of this care guide. By the way, the small plant I have growing in water was actually propagated from the bigger plant in this video. If you're interested in a propagation tutorial, you'll also find that in the blog post, link in the description. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and have a great day.